Welcome to the Angus Report, a news program for cattle producers.
From American Angus Association headquarters in St. Joseph, Missouri, we bring you the week's top headlines, including an interview with Tom Brink about the future of cattle feeding.
Ranchers in many parts of the country are dealing with continued drought.
We look at how sequestration could affect the cattle business, and a good herd health program can make all the difference. We continue the story of a steak.
This is the Angus Report. Hello, I'm Bob Cervera.
And I'm Crystal Albers.
Our top news this week. Feedlots are operating at slim margins and often losses given current input costs and the state of the cattle business. But Tom Brink of JBS Five Rivers Cattle Feeding says the industry is poised for unprecedented growth if we can just get moisture.
Cow-calf producers, if we do have rain the next couple of years, could see some prices higher than anything we've ever seen before in the business. It's going to take several years before we really build those inventories up. In fact, it may take more like 4 or 5 years to get that done. And so, meanwhile, we do have, as I mentioned, strong demand for our product, both domestically and also internationally. And so what I think you see happen is you see a period of very good years for the commercial cow-calf producer. We really need to see this industry expand, build the cow herd back up, and meet the demand that we have for our product. Otherwise, if we aren't able to do that, over time we may lose some of that demand to our competitors.
While Congress and the White House continue the budgetary debate, failed talks result in real consequences for farmers and ranchers. Automatic across-the-board spending cuts took effect March 1st, and that has meant drastic cuts to funding imperative to the cattle industry. Both the House and the Senate released budgetary proposals last week, but Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says that without a compromise, current shortfalls could result in a potential 2-week furlough of meat inspectors later this year. USDA estimates $10 billion in production losses if that happens. Some sources suggest the threat of inspector furloughs is simply budgetary bluffing by the administration to invoke action in Congress. But for now, Secretary Vilsack says a furlough of meat inspectors will happen unless sequester guidelines are rewritten or Congress comes to a budgetary agreement. We'll continue to report on this story as it develops.
Many regions this winter caught some much-needed precipitation. But was it enough to alleviate drought conditions? Texas State climatologist John Nielsen-Gammon explains long-term weather trends and what cattle producers can expect in the months ahead.
People have generally heard about El Nino and La Nina and how they affect the weather year-to-year basis. There's similar things going on a multi-decade scale that right now are predisposing the south central and southeastern United States to having dry weather. The northern plains drought is more likely to be temporary because it doesn't have those factors lined up against it. But in the south central southeast, we've been in a dry pattern for the past 15 years or so, and best we can tell, it's likely to continue for another 10 or 15 years before it reverses itself. Also, the Pacific Northwest tends to do well when the southern United States is doing poorly and vice versa. So Oregon and Washington have been fairly wet this winter. It's quite unusual what we have right now with most of the country being in drought, and so I don't think that can last for too long.
And some good news this week. Association regional managers are reporting outstanding seed stock sales across the country. And Regional Manager Vern Frey has more.
What we're seeing in this area here in Region 8, definitely sales have been pretty good. For the most part, probably better than what we kind of expected with the number of cows that have left the area and the impact the drought has had. And maybe the growth goals, the way it looks, are bringing a little bit more money on the average than what they did last year. I think that, most guys are trying to find bulls that perform well. Probably average daily gain, for the most part, has been looked at. And, they try to, some of the guys that are in these drought areas are not feeding the bulls maybe as heavy as they have in the past. And we'll definitely notice that the bulls that are in, better condition and with, probably a more limited feed supply, they're probably looking at those bulls that seem to be, probably a little better condition and probably bringing a little bit more money than the ones that are coming in a little bit greener.
When the Angus Report returns, Paige Wallace reports on how beef flavor plays an increasingly important role in satisfying consumers.
And we continue the story of a steak at Night Feed Yard in Lyons, Kansas.
Visit Angus.org to continue watching this episode of the Angus Report.
When it comes to buying or selling top quality Angus cattle, experience matters. Visit cotton-associates.com. That's cotton-associates.com to learn about our Angus sales. And join us for our upcoming sales at the Bobo Angus Female Sale, Shady Brook Angus Female Sale, Jorgensen Land and Cattle, and Brickton Farms Georgia Genetics Sale. Working together, succeeding together. That's Cotton & Associates.